Diaspora monsters. Africans who went abroad and turned out to be murderers. The diaspora narrative is powerful because it's wrapped in hope. For decades, leaving Africa for Europe, America, or Canada has been seen as the ultimate achievement. You made it out. You beat the odds. Your family back home can finally breathe. But here is what they do not show you in this glossy airport goodbyes. The crushing isolation, the identity crisis of not belonging anywhere, the suffocating pressure to succeed because failure isn't just your burden, it's your entire family's shame. For most people, they survive this pressure, they adapt, they build lives, but for a few, something breaks. And when it breaks, the results can be catastrophic. Today, we are diving into the dark side of the diaspora dream that no one wants to talk about. We are going to walk through 3 cases of Africans who went abroad and became murderers. Let's start with a story that shook London's African Christian community to its core. Pastor Eric Bikubi arrived in the UK from the Democratic Republic of Congo in the early 2000s. He wasn't coming as a refugee running from war. He came with purpose. He came to spread the gospel. In the Congolese community of London, he quickly established himself as a man of God. He was charismatic. He was convincing. He spoke with the language of deliverance and spiritual warfare that resonated with immigrants facing the harsh realities of life in a foreign land. But Eric Bikubi had a secret. Behind the Bible and the prayers was a man obsessed with the occult, with witchcraft accusations, and with a twisted theology that would justify the unthinkable. He wasn't alone in this darkness. His partner, Christy Bamu, shared his beliefs. Together, they created a toxic environment where their religious authority became a weapon of terror. On Christmas 2010, Magali's siblings came to visit from France. Among them was 15-year-old Christy Bamu and his sisters. It was supposed to be a holiday visit. Instead, it became a nightmare that would end in one of the most disturbing murders London had seen in years. Eric Bikubi and Magali became convinced that Christy was practicing kindoki, a form of witchcraft in Congolese belief. What started as accusation quickly spiraled into something demonic. For 3 days, from Christmas Eve through December 26, 2010, this teenager was subjected to unimaginable torture. He was beaten with metal bars, ceramic tiles, and hammers. His teeth were knocked out with a chisel. He was forced to strip naked. He was made to pray for his deliverance while being tortured. And through it all, Eric Bikubi, the pastor, the man of God, orchestrated the horror. On December 26th, after 3 days of torture, Christy Bamu was forced into a bathtub filled with cold water. He was so weak from the beatings that he could barely stand. Eric Bikubi and Magali held him underwater. They drowned him, a 15-year-old boy. Visiting family for Christmas was murdered in the name of casting out demons. When the police arrived at the flat in Newham, East London, they found a scene of absolute carnage. Blood everywhere, Christy's body in the bathtub, and Eric Bikubi, calm and collected, explaining that they had to kill the boy because he was a witch. The trial revealed the full horror. Christy's siblings, including his 2 sisters, had been tortured but survived. They testified that Eric Bikubi was the driving force, the one who escalated the violence, who convinced everyone that Christy was possessed. In March 2012, Eric Bikubi was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. Magali Bamu received 25 years. This wasn't just a murder. This was a window into how some African immigrants bring harmful beliefs with them and how those beliefs, unchecked and unregulated, can lead to death. Master Milimu was everything an African parent dreams of. Born in Kenya, he made it to America on a student visa to attend Wichita State University in Kansas. This wasn't easy. International students pay full tuition. The financial burden on his family back in Kenya was immense, but Master was worth it. He was studying electric engineering and computer science. He was on the dean's list. He was an honor student. In the African immigrant community in Wichita, he was the success story, the kid who made it. But nobody knew what was happening inside Marston's head. The pressure of maintaining perfect grades, the isolation of being thousands of miles away from home, the relationship problems he was having, the fear of disappointing everyone who believed in him. Something was building and no one saw it coming. Marston was dating an American woman named Tausha Haley. She was 24 years old, working and building her life. By most accounts, their relationship seemed normal from the outside, but people close to them noticed tensions, arguments, stress. Marston was dealing with academic pressure, and the relationship was adding to it. On January 7th, 2011, whatever was simmering inside Master Milimu exploded. That night, Marston went to Tausha's apartment in Wichita. What started as an argument turned violent. Marston pulled out a knife and stabbed Tausha multiple times. The attack was vicious and sustained. He didn't stop when she fell. He kept going until she was dead. But the horror did not end there. In his mind, twisted by whatever psychological break was happening, Marston decided that Tausha's mother, Carla Haley, also had to die. 52-year-old Carla Haley was at her home when Marston showed up. She had no idea that her daughter was already dead. Marston attacked her with the same brutal efficiency. He stabbed her multiple times, killing her in her own home. After the killings, Marston did not run. He did not hide. He simply waited. When the police connected him to the crime, he was arrested without resistance. The trial revealed a man who cracked under pressure. Marston's defense tried to argue that mental illness, that he had suffered a psychotic break, but the prosecution painted a picture of premeditation, especially with the second murder. The jury agreed. In 2012, Master Milimu was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adewumi Desalu looked like he had it all figured out. He was 35 years old, originally from Nigeria, living in Brampton, Ontario, one of Canada's most diverse cities with a large African population. He worked as an IT project manager. Good job, good salary. He had a wife, Damilola, and 2 beautiful children. From the outside, he was another successful African immigrant story, but inside the walls of their home, things were falling apart. The marriage was in trouble. There were arguments, financial stress, the kind of pressures that many immigrant families face but rarely talk about. You can't tell people back home that you're struggling. You can't admit that the dream isn't as perfect as it looks on social media. You suffer in silence, and for Adewumi, that silence was deadly. November 7th, 2018 started like many other difficult nights in the Desalu household. Adewumi and Damilola were arguing. The details of whatever triggered that specific argument are not fully public, but what happened next is documented in horrifying detail. At some point during the argument, Adewumi grabbed a knife. He stabbed his wife, Damilola, multiple times. As she lay dying, he did not stop. He did not call for help. He didn't realize what he'd done. Instead, he went to where his children were. His 10-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son were in the house. They likely heard the argument. They definitely heard their mother's screams, and then the father came for them. One by one, Adewumi Desalu stabbed his own children. The little girl who called him daddy, the little boy who looked up to him. He killed them both. The crime scene was described by first-hand responders as one of the most disturbing they had ever encountered. 3 bodies, a father covered in blood, and an attempted suicide that failed. After killing his family, Adewumi tried to take his own life by stabbing himself. But he survived. When Peel Regional Police arrived at the home in Aloma Crescent, Brampton, around 3 a.m., they found him alive but wounded, lying among the bodies of his wife and children. Adewumi Desalu was rushed to hospital, treated for his wounds, then arrested. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The Nigerian community in Brampton and across Canada was in shock. The trial took years, but in 2022, The verdict came down. Guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. By the time he's eligible for parole, he will be 60 years old. Family annihilation cases are rare but devastating. Psychologists who study these cases often find common patterns: financial stress, marital breakdown, a sense of failure, an inability to see a way out. But none of that explains or excuses what Adewumi did. So what connects these 3 stories? They all involve Africans abroad who, under pressure and in isolation, committed acts that destroyed lives. These aren't isolated incidents. There are more stories like this, stories that don't make international headlines but devastate communities. The diaspora narratives needs to include these stories, not to shame or stereotype, but to understand the full picture. For every success story, there are struggles, and in rare tragic cases, there are complete breakdowns that end in violence. The pressure to succeed in the diaspora is real and it is crushing. You are not just living for yourself. You are carrying your family's hopes, your community's prayers, and your nation's reputation on your shoulders. And to add to that, the isolation of being far from your support systems, the identity crisis of not fully belonging in your host country, and the mental health stigma that prevents many Africans from seeking help, and you have a dangerous cocktail. But here is what we need to be clear about. These men made choices, evil, irreversible choices. They are responsible for their actions, but their stories should force us to have the uncomfortable conversations about the diaspora experience, about mental health in African immigrant communities, about the facade we maintain, about the price some people pay when the dreams becomes too heavy to carry.